Someone you know will die one day, and when they do, someone else will make arrangements. There will be a place, a ritual, a careful handling of the body. You have probably never stopped to ask where that impulse comes from, or how old it is. But the real story of when and why humans first began burying their dead is one of the most profound and unsettling discoveries in the entire history of archaeology, and it says something about what it means to be human that nothing else quite captures. Here's the first thing to understand. Most animals do not bury their dead. A deer that collapses in a field is left where it falls. A fish dies and sinks. Even intelligent social animals, wolves, elephants, chimpanzees, while they sometimes show behaviors around death that researchers find striking, do not systematically place their dead in prepared locations, cover them deliberately, or return to those places in ways that suggest ongoing recognition of the site as meaningful. The gap between what other animals do and what humans do around death is not a small one. It is a chasm. And understanding when that chasm opened tells us something essential about the evolution of the human mind. For a long time, the archaeological consensus placed the earliest confirmed burials at roughly 100,000 years ago, associated with anatomically modern Homo sapiens at sites in the Middle East and North Africa. This fit neatly into a broader picture of modern human cognition emerging around that period, along with other markers of symbolic thinking like ochre pigment use and shell bead jewelry. Burial, in this view, was part of a cognitive package that made humans distinctly human. Then something unexpected happened. In 2015, deep inside the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, paleoanthropologist Lee Berger and his team discovered something that challenged the entire timeline. They found multiple individuals of a species called Homo naledi, an archaic, small-brained hominin with a brain roughly one-third the size of modern humans, and they found them in a remote chamber that was extraordinarily difficult to reach. The bodies showed no signs of being washed there by water or dragged there by predators. The most straightforward interpretation, the one the research team eventually concluded was best supported by the evidence, was that Homo naledi had deliberately placed their dead in that chamber. The date of those remains, somewhere between 236,000 and 335,000 years ago, predating anatomically modern humans entirely. This is where it gets interesting. Because if Homo naledi was burying its dead with a brain a third the size of yours, then the behavior cannot be explained as a product of modern human cognitive sophistication alone. Something much older, something rooted in social complexity and some form of awareness of death itself, may have been driving it. Researcher and evolutionary anthropologist Agustin Fuentes, who collaborated on the Homo naledi analysis, argued that deliberate body disposal and even symbolic marking of the dead may have emerged much earlier in hominin evolution than previously believed, and that the capacity for these behaviors may not require the specific brain architecture that modern humans developed. The implications are uncomfortable and fascinating in equal measure. Because if burial is not unique to modern humans, then the question shifts from when did humans first bury their dead to what kind of mind does it take to treat the dead as something other than simply matter to be left behind? And that question has no clean answer. What we do know is what burial requires, cognitively and socially. It requires recognizing that a specific individual has died, that this individual was distinct from and valued by the group, and that some deliberate action is warranted in response. Whether that action involves grief, ritual, belief in an afterlife, or simply social solidarity, archaeologists debate vigorously. But all of those possibilities share a common foundation: awareness of death as a category of event that matters. That awareness, the ability to recognize the permanence of death and feel its weight socially, may be one of the oldest and most defining characteristics of the hominin line. The earliest burials associated with modern humans do reveal something more, evidence of care and intentionality that goes beyond simple disposal. At Skull Cave in Israel, dating to roughly 120,000 years ago, an individual was buried with a boar's jaw placed in their hands. At Kafse Cave in the same region, a child was found buried with deer antlers placed across the body. These weren't accidents of preservation, they were deliberate acts, objects placed with the dead. A behavior that implies some concept of the dead person continuing to be a person in some sense, at least in the minds of the living who buried them. This impulse to mark the dead as individuals, to give them things, to prepare their resting place with care, continues without interruption from those first burials right through to the present day. The objects change, the rituals change, the specific beliefs about what death is and what follows it vary enormously across cultures and across time, but the underlying behavior, treating the dead as something other than merely biological matter, placing them somewhere deliberate, doing something intentional in response to their absence, has not disappeared from any human culture ever documented. Not one. Here's the modern mirror. When you think about what burial represents, at its deepest level, it is an act of memory. You are doing something to say, this person was here, this person mattered, this person's body should not simply be abandoned. That impulse is so old that it may predate our species. It connects you to Homo naledi, struggling through a dark cave to reach a chamber far from daylight. It connects you to a Neanderthal placing wildflowers, or possibly just burying a body with care in soft earth. It connects you to a child at Kafse, whose group placed antlers across their small body 120,000 years ago. Someone you know will die one day, and when they do, you will recognize the death as significant, and you will do something in response. You will be doing what something in us has been doing for at least 300,000 years, possibly longer, and in doing it, you will be participating in the oldest, deepest, most universal human behavior that we know of.